All right, welcome back, everyone. Today, we are diving into a massive, myth-busting tour of two of the absolute most legendary empires to ever exist, Babylon and Assyria. We're going to be tearing down the rumors, digging through the ancient rubble, and finally figuring out what's fact and what is just pure fiction. So, let's get right into it. So, looking at this, you've got to wonder, right? Is the greatest city in human history just a bunch of myths? We all know the wild stories, massive towers piercing the clouds, lush hanging gardens floating in the middle of the desert. But how much of this impossible scale was actually real, and how much of it was just really good ancient propaganda? Let's find out.
Okay, let's kick things off with part one, the mystery of their origins and those very first inhabitants. The history of Babylon's roots is literally the ultimate ancient drama. It's like a giant puzzle. On one hand, you've got Herodotus, the Greek historian, recording the mainstream outsider accounts, but then you have Berosus, a local Babylonian priest who actually, well, scratch that, he completely rejected the mainstream. He claimed the first inhabitants were entirely uncivilized until this mythical, half-man, half-fish being named ONS supposedly emerged from the sea to teach them literature, science, and city building. No way, right? But that's what they believed.
Moving right along to part two, Nimrod and the founding of an empire.
Way before Babylon became the center of the universe, there was Nimrod. This guy was the ultimate ancient conqueror. Widely known as the first great builder after the flood, he actually founded the foundational cities of Erech, Akkad, and Calneh. Local lore even claims he was the king who threw the prophet Abraham into a fiery furnace. These early cities established the kingdom's deep roots. And you really can't talk about this without mentioning the later great King Hammurabi. Hammurabi didn't just sit on a throne, he totally transformed the region. He dug these massive, complex canal systems that completely revolutionized their agriculture, built formidable defensive walls, and basically turned Babylon into an unparalleled, thriving capital. A real game changer.
All right, on to part three, the wonders of Babylon, specifically the walls and gardens. Look at this number. Over 56 million francs. And no, that is not the GDP of a small modern country. That represents the equivalent weight in gold of just one single statue of the god Jupiter sitting right inside the Grand Temple of Babylon. The wealth pouring into this city was so immense, so over the top, that historians describe Babylon as literally being paved in gold. And they spent that wealth in crazy ways. So imagine trying to cure your partner's homesickness. Most of us might buy flowers, right? Well, to cure his Persian concubine who missed her lush green mountains, the king engineered the literal hanging gardens. They built these massive layered stone terraces on a flat desert, covered them in thick sheets of lead to stop water from rotting the structure, and used hidden, highly complex machinery to pump water directly up from the Euphrates River. It was basically a mountain of vegetation suspended in thin air.
But honestly, Queen Semiramis might have outdone the whole lot of them. She builds two colossal palaces on opposite sides of the Euphrates. But instead of just taking a boat across like a normal person, she ordered the river to be temporarily diverted and built a brick tunnel directly beneath the riverbed. It was coated in melted bitumen to make it completely waterproof. And according to ancient sources, they completed this underwater marvel in just 7 days. 7 days! That's insane!
Now, obviously, with all that impossible wealth lying around, you need some serious protection. Enter the inner walls of Babylon. 85 cubits. To put that into perspective, that is a staggering, almost unbelievable height for a defensive wall. And get this, they were about 90 cubits thick. Try to imagine being an invading army, walking up, and just looking at a sheer brick cliff face that massive, equipped with giant bronze gates and hundreds of guard towers. It was specifically designed to make enemies feel absolutely helpless.
Which brings us to part four, the Tower of Babel. The ultimate question. Is it myth or is it reality?
Take a look at this. These are the ruins of the Borsippa Tower, standing just outside Babylon. Many historians actually believe this vitrified step pyramid was the real-life inspiration for the Tower of Babel story. We even have these ancient clay cylinders from Nebuchadnezzar where he straight up brags about restoring this exact tower. He claims earlier kings failed to finish it because the people were scattered. Sound familiar? And here's where it gets really fascinating. The Babylonians actually mapped the cosmos right onto the tower itself. As you can see, it had 7 distinct layers, and each one was dedicated to a celestial body and painted a very specific color.
So it went from black for Saturn at the bottom, moving up through planets like Jupiter and Mars, all the way up to a brilliant, shiny golden top layer dedicated to the sun. It wasn't just a tower, it was a massive astrological observatory, really showcasing their incredibly advanced understanding of the universe.
Let's pivot a bit for Part 5, the rise and fall of glorious Nineveh. You know, Assyria was an absolute military juggernaut, but history shows us that all empires eventually fall. When a massive coalition finally breached the walls of Nineveh, the Assyrian king Sardanapalus realized it was totally over. But instead of surrendering, he retreated to his spectacular palace, gathered up his immense wealth and his entire court, and just set the whole building ablaze. He literally chose to be consumed by the flames of his own empire rather than hand it over to his enemies. Talk about a dramatic exit.
And well, Babylon eventually met a very similar doom. Just think back to that 56 million franc gold statue we talked about earlier, and contrast that extreme, unfathomable wealth with this grim ancient prophecy from the book of Isaiah. It predicted that this glorious kingdom would literally turn to dust, inhabited only by wild beasts and owls. And that's exactly what happened. Over the centuries, the rivers shifted, those mighty 85-cubit walls crumbled, and the greatest city on earth became nothing more than a mound of dirt.
So, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative thought today. We build our massive skyscrapers out of glass and steel, and honestly, we feel pretty invincible. But when you look at the ruins of Babylon and Nineveh, empires that literally ruled the known world, you really have to ask yourself, in 4,000 years, will our greatest modern cities be anything more than myths, legends, and dust in the wind? It really makes you think. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, guys. Keep questioning everything, and I'll see you next time.